Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are discussing one of the most shocking and world-shaking developments in modern history, something that few believed could ever happen and something that has now stunned leaders, analysts, and governments across the globe. Ukraine has fully retaken Crimea, and the world is still trying to understand how such a dramatic shift unfolded. This moment marks a turning point that will be studied for decades because it reshapes alliances, redraws strategic maps, and challenges long established assumptions about military power and geopolitical influence. In this video, we are breaking down what happened, how it happened, and what it means for the future. The news of Ukraine reclaiming Crimea spread with lightning speed. People everywhere were shocked, amazed, confused, and asking the same question: how did this even happen? For years, Crimea was considered one of the most fortified and politically sensitive regions on Earth. Many analysts believed that any attempt to take it back would trigger an enormous conflict that no nation could afford to escalate. Yet the outcome that once seemed impossible has now taken place in a way that few expected. And this sudden shift has sent a wave of debates from Washington to London, from Brussels to Beijing, and everywhere in between. The operation that led to Crimea's retaking was not a single event, but a sequence of strategic moves that came together with surprising speed. Ukraine began by applying pressure along multiple fronts. Instead of announcing major offensives, the Ukrainian military leaned heavily on tactics that relied on unpredictability, disruption, and precise strikes. Small but highly coordinated units targeted Russian supply lines, communication hubs, and air defense systems. Each strike seemed minor in the moment, but over time it eroded the stability of Russian positions in Crimea. Many observers believe that one of the biggest surprises was Ukraine's mastery of modern drone warfare. The use of drones to disable surveillance systems, blind naval vessels, and target ammunition depots proved to be a powerful equalizer. Ukrainian engineers had been quietly upgrading drone capacities for months, giving them longer range, smarter tracking abilities, and more advanced evasion techniques. By the time the final stages of the Crimea push began, Russian forces were struggling to adapt to the sheer precision of these attacks. And once command centers were disrupted, defensive coordination began to weaken rapidly. At the same time, something else was happening behind the scenes. Ukrainian intelligence had spent years gathering information about weaknesses in the Crimean infrastructure. This included knowledge of which bases were lightly guarded, which supply routes were most vulnerable, and which early warning radar stations were aging or malfunctioning. When Ukrainian forces finally moved, they used this intelligence with near-perfect timing. They hit the weakest spots first, forcing Russian units to shift resources in a chaotic manner and exposing new vulnerabilities in the process. International support also played a key role. While no foreign country directly fought in Crimea, Ukraine had been receiving extensive training, equipment, and intelligence assistance. Satellite mapping, drone data, logistical coordination, and real-time battlefield analytics all contributed to Ukraine's ability to out-maneuver a larger and more heavily equipped opponent. The precise level of support remains classified, but military observers agree it was substantial enough to make a decisive difference. But what truly shocked the world was the speed at which the final collapse occurred. Russian forces in Crimea, despite years of fortification, found themselves overwhelmed by a combination of internal confusion, logistical shortages, and rapid Ukrainian advances. Defensive lines crumbled not because of lack of firepower, but because communication networks were disrupted, reinforcements were delayed, and key positions were hit by highly accurate munitions at exactly the wrong moment. Once Ukraine gained control of certain critical intersections, the rest of the peninsula became increasingly untenable for Russian units. As Ukrainian forces closed in on the major cities, many residents were taken by surprise. Some had expected resistance to continue for weeks or months, but within a short span, the Ukrainian flag was raised over multiple administrative buildings, and major strategic points were secured. By the time the world realized what was happening, the operation was already nearly complete. Commentators began calling it one of the most unexpected victories of the century. World leaders reacted swiftly. Statements flooded in from NATO, the European Union, the United States, and dozens of nations in Asia, Africa, and South America. Some expressed support for Ukraine's territorial integrity, while others warned of escalating tensions. Even countries that typically remain neutral were forced to issue statements because the event was simply too significant to ignore. The retaking of Crimea instantly became one of the most discussed subjects across diplomatic circles. Experts say that the psychological impact of this event may be even greater than the territorial changes. For years, the belief that powerful nations could not be challenged militarily had created a sense of permanent stalemate in global politics. But Ukraine's operation shattered that assumption. It demonstrated that smaller nations, through innovation, strategy, and international cooperation, can defy traditional power structures. This has major implications for global military planning. Defense ministries around the world are now reviewing how drone warfare, cyber tactics, and decentralized command structures can change the nature of modern conflict. Meanwhile, inside Ukraine, celebrations erupted across cities and towns. People who had long dreamed of seeing Crimea return under Ukrainian control filled the streets with flags, fireworks, and music. For many, this moment represented not only a military victory, but a restoration of national pride and identity. Families who had been separated for years due to conflict suddenly saw the possibility of reunification. Those who had lost homes in Crimea began hoping for a chance to return. However, the situation remains extremely delicate. Rebuilding Crimea will require massive resources. Infrastructure has been damaged, trust has been shaken, and the political environment remains tense. Ukrainian officials have already stated that their priority is restoring essential services, stabilizing security, and ensuring that the peninsula transitions smoothly. They are also preparing for humanitarian challenges, including displacement, shortages, and the need for rapid reconstruction projects. The international community has begun discussing the long-term consequences. Economic experts are analyzing how this event will affect global markets, especially energy prices, shipping routes, and defense stocks. Some are predicting significant shifts in investment flows as companies reevaluate the stability of certain regions. Others believe that new diplomatic alliances may emerge as nations reconsider their strategic partnerships. In particular, the event raises questions about how major powers will respond to future conflicts where conventional military dominance is no longer enough to guarantee control. Politically, the retaking of Crimea will likely remain a subject of debate for years. Governments around the world are already holding emergency meetings to assess the new geopolitical reality. Military theorists are preparing detailed studies on the tactics used, and think tanks are releasing reports on what this means for global security policies. There is even talk that this event could influence elections in several countries as leadership decisions on foreign policy come under renewed scrutiny. The world's major media outlets have dedicated hours of coverage to the story, analyzing every detail of the operation. Many journalists are calling it a case study in 21st century warfare. They highlight how Ukraine combined technology, intelligence, and strategy in a way that caught even seasoned military analysts off guard. Some reports describe it as a revolution in battlefield tactics, showing that speed, precision, and adaptability can sometimes outweigh sheer firepower. At the same time, discussions are taking place about the future of Russia-Ukraine relations. Analysts are unsure how Russia will respond in the long term. Some expect diplomatic escalation, while others believe that internal challenges may limit Russia's options. The event has triggered debates within Russia as well, with political observers noting rising questions about leadership, strategy, and military preparedness. How Russia decides to react will shape the next chapter of global security. Ukraine, meanwhile, is preparing for what comes next. Officials have stated that their focus is not on escalation but on stabilizing the region, rebuilding communities, and moving toward long-term peace. They emphasize the importance of diplomacy, economic recovery, and reintegration of Crimea into Ukraine's political and social systems. But they also acknowledge that challenges remain and that tensions could rise again if the situation is not carefully managed. As the world continues to process the shock, one thing is certain: history has changed. The retaking of Crimea has rewritten assumptions about military strength, regional stability, and global influence. It has demonstrated that innovation, resilience, and strategic cooperation can overcome even the most entrenched obstacles, and it has reminded the world that unexpected events can reshape the global landscape overnight. For Ukraine, this moment represents both triumph and responsibility. The victory is historic, but the work ahead is enormous. The country now faces the task of ensuring stability, protecting civilians, rebuilding infrastructure, and securing diplomatic support. The world will be watching closely to see how Ukraine manages this new chapter and whether this moment becomes a stepping stone toward lasting peace or the beginning of new challenges. As we conclude this deep dive, it is clear that the retaking of Crimea is more than a headline. It is a turning point in global affairs, a moment that will be discussed in schools, universities, and strategic circles for years to come. The world has witnessed a dramatic shift in the balance of power, and the consequences of this shift will continue unfolding for a long time. Thank you for watching, and thank you for staying with us through this detailed breakdown. If you want more explanations, updates, and analysis on global events, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and share your thoughts in the comments. The story of Crimea's retaking is still evolving, and we will continue to follow every development. Stay tuned for more, and until next time, take care and stay informed.